Order. Let's talk about it now with our panel. We have with us Ken Cuccinelli, former Virginia Attorney General, Neera Tanden, President and CEO of the Center for American Progress, CNN political commentator Alice Stewart, and Congressman André Carson, Democrat of Indiana. Thanks, one and all, for being here. Congressman Carson, let me start with you. You're one of two Muslims serving in the U.S. Congress. You've accused the president of demagoguery on this issue. Is there any form of tighter vetting that you could support?
It takes 18 to 24 months to vet as it stands right now. I think Mr. Trump has already shown his hand. He's trying to now put lipstick on a pig, pun intended, and this is discriminatory against Muslims.
How is it, if it's 7 countries, that? Sure. How is it against Muslims?
Well, here's the thing. None of the countries that were involved in 9/11 were even listed. We're talking Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I'm not suggesting that they should be listed. But this is hurting our partnerships internationally. We rely on these countries for intelligence. We rely on these countries for the investments that have been made by those folks who come to this country, start businesses, and they're hiring Americans and putting Americans back to work.
Jake, in terms of this being a Muslim ban, look, if this was a Muslim ban specifically targeted at Muslims, they would have gone after every 51 Muslim majority country. However, they're only focused on 7 that were identified under the Obama administration. And that is critical to remember. And with regard to 9/11, a Senate committee came out last year and said that since 9/11, 60 people from these 7 countries have committed acts of terrorism in the United States, not to mention ones they've carried out in Europe. So that is a serious concern.
In the U.S. and Europe, you mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Look, America's not Europe. This is a precursor to ultimately discriminate against Muslims worldwide. He's using the language of religion to enforce his policies, and it simply will not work, as evidenced by the protests we've seen.
Look, I think the issue here is the court adjudicated this, and they said you can take into account the president's words in the campaign to look at what happened here. He called it a Muslim ban. He called it a Muslim ban multiple times. It's not my words, it's his words. And then the court looked at this. So we had Republican and Democratic judges who were nominated by Republicans and Democrats so far unanimously say that this is beyond his purview. And, you know, actually, no one's arguing, at least I'm not arguing, that there can be additional vetting, but the reality of this is it was sloppily put together, and that they are actually, in a way, I think, to get to Muslim ban, and that's why the court found as it did.
Okay.
Yeah, this is radically overbroad of an injunction.
By the Ninth Circuit.
Oh, it's outrageous. It gives constitutional rights to, just to pick one of the countries, to Somalians who have never been to this country, who have never had a visa. 99.99% of the people covered by this executive order have no constitutional rights, have no claims to anything, and yet this court, beyond even what the Washington Attorney General asked for, gave an injunction against all of that. It is outrageous.
So do you think, if you were advising President Trump, would you say, take this to the Supreme Court, you can win?
No, as I've said on this network earlier this week, rewrite this order. You've now got the set of complaints from the court, basically. Write a separate order for each category identified. And the 99.99% of people I just talked about will never, ever have that order heard in court, because there's no one to sue on it. And then we can debate, the rest of it. The lawful permanent residents, people with visas who's never been, break it down however you like, and they all, many of them have different levels of due process rights, and then write each order for each category.
I think what you're seeing in this whole episode here is that we have a president who didn't go through the normal processes. They didn't really consult with the Justice Department. They didn't really consult with DHS, slapped together essentially an executive order to do his campaign promise. And it is being challenged in the courts, and he's actually losing because he's done such a poor job. And I think you realize, I think the challenge here, I mean, you've just said it. He should rewrite it. He could have written it better from the beginning.
Isn't it amazing that what we're fighting over is how fast a politician is keeping their promises?
No, he's not keeping his promise because
we can all agree that this rollout was shoddily done. That's understandable across the board. But look, the fact that the 3-judge panel referenced comments Donald Trump made on the campaign trail and didn't at all reference the actual statute that is the foundation of this executive order, 1182, which gives the president the authority to suspend entry of aliens into this country that he deems detrimental to this country. That speaks volumes. That speaks volumes that this is a political ruling by the court. And I think I agree with Ken. We need to rewrite it in a more strict order, but I think with regard to the appeal to the Supreme Court, we need to slow roll the appeal and fast track the nomination of Gorsuch.
So I just want to show this tweet by Donald Trump on February 5th. Just cannot believe a judge would put our country in such peril. If something happens, blame him and court system, people pouring in. Bad! Exclamation point. Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe called this not just preemptive scapegoating, but an attack on the role and rule of law. Congressman?
I agree. I mean, I think that Mr. Trump, his impulsivity concerns me. I've said it over and over again. The fact that he's publicly battling with judges via Twitter, it says that he, one, is unfit to be commander-in-chief, and secondly, I think it speaks to his deeper need for validation. He hasn't demonstrated the same kind of policy depth as a President Obama or President Clinton. He hasn't demonstrated the kind of discipline necessary to be commander-in-chief. And who is he listening to? Obviously no one but himself.
Congressman, did you criticize President Obama when he, in person, bullied the Supreme Court over Citizens United, or when in May of 2012, when he attempted, successfully I might add, to intimidate the Supreme Court over Obamacare? I don't remember this sort of hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth.
President Obama was the anti-bully.
No, it isn't.
Donald
No,
Trump
it
is
is
a classical
completely
bully. He's a textbook bully.
Okay,
The
just
President
to be clear,
Obama did it in person.
No.
Let's go ahead, Aaron.
Can I just say, this is a huge difference. There is a difference between saying, you know what, I disagree with the rulings of a court, and to talk about the ruling itself. Not to, what Donald Trump did was say these judges, the judges, so-called judges, he's attacked the judiciary's independence writ large. If Barack Obama had gone to the well of the Congress and said, these judges have no right to make a decision about Citizens United, or they're imperiling us at writ large, that would be very different than saying, you know, I disagree with the ruling you had. Every politician has a right to say the merits of a decision. What's a problem with Donald Trump, and what should worry constitutionalists who for years have been lecturing liberals about separation of powers, is the fact that this president is attacking a separate branch of government as if it doesn't have any say.
Ken, I'll come to you first next.
Over the years,
we're going to take a very quick break. And I'll come to you next, I promise. Coming up, it's getting hot in here. Republican congressmen taking heat from their constituents at feisty town halls across America. What effect are they having? That's next. Vice President Mike Pence's name booed at a town hall in Utah, of all places, held by Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz. Democrats around the country have organized, in part to show their opposition to a potential Obamacare repeal, as well as other Trump policies. Chaffetz accused the protesters of being paid and shipped in from out of state, although we're still waiting for the evidence of that. The panel's back with me. And Ken, I wanted to give you the last word on this trash-talking the court issue. Yeah.
Look, I'm an idealist lawyer. I don't think any executive should browbeat judges, but it has gone on for a long time, all the way back to a switch in time that saved 9. And unfortunately, even with President Obama, we saw that it worked. And when you have a practicalist type president like Trump, you're going to see more of it because he thinks it can work.
All right, let's turn to the town halls. Alice, what's your response to this? I've heard a lot of people saying this reminds them of the Tea Party protests at town halls that we saw in 2009, 2010, down to the fact that party leaders are saying, oh, it's just a bunch of billionaires shipping these people in.
I don't see it that way. Look, Frank Bruni has a good piece in the New York Times this morning. He says the outrage of the Democrats is consistent with the outrageousness of President Trump, which is true. But at the same time, yelling is one thing, but without a consistent message, it's for naught. And you have to remember the Tea Party had a good message. It was about doing away with the tremendous debt, government spending, and pushback on Obamacare, and they stuck with that message. To date, I don't really see with the town halls we're seeing now in these groups a consistent message. And I think if they can do that, I think it will be helpful. But at this point, it just seems as though it's a lot of people getting together and being vocal.
I couldn't disagree more. I think the town halls are really focused on the ACA and government overreach.
The Affordable Care Act.
The Affordable Care Act. I mean, you're seeing people rise up who've benefited from the Affordable Care Act and simply tell their stories, not only in Utah, but really in Georgia, in Florida, in deep red districts, which were plus 24 Republican districts. You're finding people really tell their stories. And I think the message of these town halls is that people are scared of what Donald Trump is going to do to them. They don't want a repeal of the Affordable Care Act, and they don't want the government overreaching, a little bit like the town halls before. But you're seeing incredible action, and it's gaining every week. There have been protests every weekend in places like South Bend, Indiana, places in the middle of the country.
You don't buy it?
I'm listening. This is amazing. I'm going to mark this day on my calendar. Government overreach.
Yes,
this is a problem now.
With a Muslim ban. Yeah.
That is not a Muslim ban. And here we are. This is a president who's emphatically enforcing law, and we can debate how he went about doing that. But with President Obama, it was completely rewriting the law.
A minute ago, you literally said he has to rewrite it. You were critical of it himself.
And he's going to win. And he's going to win in court. When they do that, they're going to be set up to win.
Have you seen any protests at any town hall, sir?
Listen, I've watched the protests. I lived through the protests in 2010. I think that we're seeing a pushback against these European-style austerity measures, proposals to cut Social Security and other entitlement programs. Well, listen, Republicans are making it harder for Americans to purchase a home. And even talking about repealing the Affordable Care Act causes angst. Now, reapportionment and redistricting makes it much more difficult to recapture the House, but the movement on the ground says that there's hope.
Well, I guess one of the things, Alice, about these protests is I was reminded on Twitter by a conservative that these protests were definitely a foreshadowing of Republicans retaking the House in 2010, but they did not stop the Affordable Care Act from passing.
Absolutely. And it didn't hurt that Barack Obama had both houses, the House and the Senate at the time, too, so that was helpful. But what it did do, it helped Republicans gain seats in 2010, and it really started a groundswell, which led to more houses at the state level, local and state level, and here in Congress, which has led us to where we are today, having the House and Senate. And that's key. And that's one of the focuses of the Tea Party movement, was to get people involved on the local level and have good representation at the state level and in Congress.
You're absolutely
the Tea Party theme is the same today as it was 7 years ago when it started.
But Alice makes a phenomenal point, and we're seeing that. We're seeing more people run. People are getting excited about running at the state. Progressives are looking at city council races, state and local races, assembly, a Senate, as well as Congress. We're seeing a groundswell. It's exactly, she makes an excellent point, that's what you need to see, and that's what we're seeing even earlier. And it's true the Affordable Care Act passed, but we had 60 votes in the Senate. They don't have 60 votes. And the problem for the Affordable Care Act is even Chris Christie cannot tell you what the replacement is. That is the big challenge for them. And these people in these town halls are simply asking this: do not repeal the Affordable Care Act without telling us how I'm going to be better off. And these members of Congress are getting booed because they cannot answer that simple question.
I want to give you the last word. When you see this groundswell, there does seem to be a lot of energy with the left right now.
Sure.
Whether you think that George Soros has a role in it or not.
Well, look, Donald Trump has a special talent for inspiring the angst and anger of his opponents to a degree that I can't name anybody else really in politics can do. And that is not long-term strategically helpful for him or for Republicans either, because anger, whether we like it or not, and I don't like it, is the most motivating single form of reaction. Hope is nice. There's two kinds of ways to motivate: hope and fear. And I prefer hope, but fear reigns in politics as much as we cry about it because it works. And that's what these folks are playing on.
Great panel. Thank you so much, one and all, for being here. I really appreciate it. Coming up.